everyone. The first project we're going to work on this week is called our Text as Shape project. The goal of this project is to get you to look at the shape of letters and numbers and to think about the three concepts: scale, positive, negative, and texture. So you're going to be making three compositions. One is going to focus on scale, one is going to focus on positive, negative relationships, and the third is going to focus on texture. And you're going to create your content using simple letters and numbers or numbers. So I don't want you to type out words and I don't want you to create statements. I really want you to look at the examples that were given and think about how you can communicate the idea of scale, positive, negative, and texture using just simple shapes. And these shapes are letters and numbers. So to do this, you're probably going to want to work with a software. You can work in Photoshop if you're comfortable in Photoshop, or in Illustrator, or you can hand draw, or you can use cut and paste methods. So it's entirely up to you. I understand that there's a large range of abilities, technical abilities in the class. But to get you started, I thought I would show you how to do it in Illustrator. That way, if you want to work in Illustrator, you can. Remember, the lab texts are there every day from 12 until 8 to help you as well. So if you have a vision and you bring in your vision, the lab text can work with you in Illustrator to help you execute your vision, or in Photoshop. They both know Photoshop as well. So I'll go ahead and kind of show you how to set it up and how to do it in Illustrator, and then you can decide on your own what would best fit your needs. I also will be available to help you. I'm thinking of coming in on Thursday night to work with students that need help, because you will need to have this exercise finished and uploaded to D2L by, I think it's Thursday night for peer review. So if you want to come in, I'll be there from 5 to 8 on Thursday night. And what I would ask is that you just have a strong vision already in place for what you want to do. And you should have a strong vision when you're working with the lab techs as well, so that they aren't actually doing your design work, they're just helping you execute your vision. Okay, so to get started in Illustrator, you notice that you have layers in Illustrator. Layers are just like what you have in Photoshop, and they allow you to kind of organize information. I've gone ahead and I've created a layer with just some examples here to show you past examples of this assignment. So the top row is positive, negative examples. The middle row here is scale examples, and the third row is texture. So the tool you're really going to use in Illustrator for this project is the text tool. So if you notice in your toolbar here, you have a T. The T represents creating type in Illustrator. It's the type tool. Notice when I click on that tool, I also get a bunch of things popping up at the top here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this tool, and then I'm going to go inside of my printable area. The printable area is basically framed by a black line here, a black rectangle. And this printable area allows you to see what will print and what won't. Anything outside of this rectangle will not print with the Illustrator document. And that's really nice, because if you've noticed in Photoshop, you're kind of stuck with the constraints of your printable area. You have to work with inside your rectangle or your shape of your file. But in Illustrator, you can go outside of those boundaries. You have a huge amount of what's called scratch space that you can just store stuff and access it, use it whenever you want. Illustrator is also a little different than Photoshop in that it uses what's called vector graphics, and vector graphics are not based on pixels. In Photoshop, you have pixels, which are tiny dots of information. In Illustrator, we have vectors, which are mathematically scalable units of information. And so what that means is when you work in Illustrator, everything is scalable. You can make something 100 inches by 100 inches or 1 inch by 1 inch, and it won't interpolate or hurt the resolution. In Photoshop, that's different. Because you're using pixels, it's resolution dependent, and you really have to think about what you scan in things at or what you take digital photographs with in terms of the resolution, because once it's in the program, you can't make it any bigger without interpolating it, which basically means degrading it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. The first thing I'm going to show you is the text tool. So I'm going to go ahead and click inside my printable area here, and I'm going to type a letter. I'm just going to go to my keyboard and I'll type out a T. Notice the size of that T, and then I'm going to look at the top here and notice that I have 12 points in the font size. If you want to change the font size, you can. You can click 14, but if you've already typed a letter, what's really good is to highlight it first, so that letter. So I'm going to just go and push down with my mouse, and I'm going to go over the letter itself, and then I'm going to go down to a much bigger size. I'm going to go 60 points here. Okay, so 60 points, and the other thing I want to look at when I'm working with text is my font type. What font am I using? And we're watching a whole movie called Helvetica this week based on the Helvetica font type, and that's a sans serif font. So look at your type lectures and watch Helvetica and get kind of familiar with different fonts in Illustrator and Photoshop. So I'll go ahead and look at all the choices I have. Now, Illustrator has some default fonts, so if you're working at home, your fonts might be a little different depending on what's in your Illustrator. You can go to whole websites and download specific fonts. So once you get a little more comfortable, we'll talk more about typography. And typography is really important in design. So you really want to start looking at font types, looking at what letters look like with different fonts selected, and kind of thinking about content and what the message is and why you would use one font over another. Okay, so I'll go ahead and just keep the font I have, which is Myriad Pro. That should be fine for this exercise. And I'm going to go ahead and deselect. How do I deselect? Deselecting is, I can go up to my select menu here and click deselect if I want, and that deselects me off that letter. Or I can go and click my selection tool, which is the black arrow here. I can click on it, and that allows me to deselect or select. So if I click back on the letter is now selected, and I can do things to it. I can move it around inside of the space. I can actually scale it when I have it selected with this black arrow, the selection tool as well, just by kind of going with these bounding boxes. And if you want to constrain the proportions, you hold down Shift. If you don't, if you just want to scale it and let it distort a little, you don't have to hold down Shift. But I'm going to constrain. I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to drag. I'm going to make this much larger. So notice that once I do that, look at the font up here, and notice that the font size got huge up here. So when I physically scaled it with my selection tool, the font got much bigger. Notice also I kind of zoomed into my document when I scaled it. You have a magnify glass here in your tools called the Zoom tool. You can make your document larger, the viewable document larger or smaller by just clicking with this magnifying glass or holding down Option Alt and clicking in the opposite direction. And if you click in the opposite direction, a little negative sign appears when you hold down Option or Alt. Then it gets smaller. And that's just viewable area, so that's not going to make a difference in what size it prints. Okay, so I have my T really large here. Now, another thing I might want to do is rotate this T. So I'm going to go ahead and click my rotate tool here. The rotate tool looks like a circle. It's right here. I'm going to click on it. Once you have that rotate tool selected, you can go and select any of your text. So I'm going to go back to my selection tool. I'm going to click it. Make sure it's selected. When it's selected, it gets highlighted. So you see the bounding box around it, or you'll see a line of selectable area underneath it. Then I'm going to grab my rotate tool, and I'm just going to click on it, and I'm going to rotate it. And I can turn it in any direction. Now notice as I do this, part of the T is going out of the bounding box. That's okay. That means that this top edge here and the bottom line will not print. So you need to understand that, because when you're creating your printable area here, when you modify your document, anything outside these lines will be invisible. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do another letter now. I'm going to click on the T again, and this time I'm just going to do a couple of T's. I'm just going to type in sequence here, and I'll just type them off the page. Because I typed them all at once, they're kind of grouped together in Illustrator. So now if I grab my selection tool and click on them, I can move them all together and kind of move them around inside of the document. If you want to just create one letter, just select your type tool, type the letter, and then deselect. If you want to create groups of letter, just keep typing, and then when you're finished, go ahead and deselect. Now if I click on my type tool again, I can type more.